Hello friends, I'm Vitaly Portnikov. The Iranian Foreign Ministry claims that the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement between Russia and Iran could be signed as early as January next year. Earlier, the Kremlin indicated that such an agreement could be signed during the upcoming visit to Moscow by Iran's new president, Masoud Pezeshkian. Originally, it was planned to sign the agreement at the recent BRICS summit held in Kazan, Russia. However, for undisclosed reasons, the procedure for signing the agreement has been postponed. Now, a spokesman for the Iranian Foreign Ministry says the deal could be signed by the end of the month of Day. This month is an Iranian month, of course, ending on January 20th according to the Gregorian calendar. But you understand, today is Donald Trump's inauguration as US president. Therefore, signing the strategic partnership agreement between Russia and Iran on that day, or around the time of the inauguration, is not just trolling, but a clear signal from Vladimir Putin to the new American president and raises stakes for ceasefire talks. In the Russia-Ukraine war, Vladimir Putin knows the situation in the Middle East concerns Trump more than the Russia-Ukraine war and all post-Soviet conflicts combined. Trump promised to ensure Israel's security, end Iran's aggressive policies, and counter its nuclear program, aiming to acquire WMDs for the Ayatollah regime. Vladimir Putin knows very well that the situation in the Middle East concerns the new American president far more seriously than the Russia-Ukraine war and all the conflicts in the post-Soviet space combined. Donald Trump has repeatedly promised to ensure Israel's security, to stop Iran's aggressive policies, to counter Iran's nuclear program, the goal of which, as we understand, is to obtain weapons of mass destruction, which the unpredictable HU regime would like to adopt. However, with the signing of the Strategic Comprehensive Partnership Agreement between Russia and Iran, everything will change. Donald Trump will understand that now Russia, another nuclear power, stands behind Iran. Most likely, the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement between Russia and Iran will resemble the agreement that Putin signed with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And, as we know, this agreement included mutual military support in the event of an attack on one of the participating countries. The North Korean leader is sticking to the terms he agreed to when he signed the deal with Putin. He supplies Russia with military equipment necessary for Moscow to continue the Russia-Ukraine war, and even soldiers who are fighting on the Russian-Ukrainian front. In the case of Iran, now of course any country that decides, for example, to destroy Iran's nuclear program, or even to send its troops into Iranian territory to thwart any aggressive intentions of the Islamic Republic, will have to reckon with the possibility of Russian military assistance. Yes, obviously, Russia is unlikely to actively participate in the war in the Middle East today. The collapse of its efforts to support Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria has clearly demonstrated this. However, Moscow may take a different approach. The collapse of its efforts to support Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria has clearly demonstrated this. However, Moscow may take a different path, supplying Iran with the latest technology, assisting in the creation of the same atomic bomb. After all, if yesterday Russia was among those countries that opposed the Iranian nuclear program, and if yesterday Russia participated in negotiations over the so-called nuclear deal with Iran, then tomorrow, after signing the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement, it seems there will be no issues for the Russian political leadership with the emergence of yet another nuclear power, as long as that nuclear power is positioned against the United States. And here, of course, the simplest and most logical question arises. In such a situation, how is the President of the United States planning to negotiate with the President of the Russian Federation, even if he meets with him? How can one not notice Vladimir Putin's obvious desire to weaken the United States? Donald Trump's election as US president signals to Putin that Russia's hands are untied. Putin believes Trump fears him more than Biden, who is eager to engage with Russia, thinking he can negotiate an agreement. For Putin, Biden's willingness to negotiate and seek compromise signals weakness and insecurity, and that's because the new American president is eager to make contact with his Russian counterpart and believes he can reach an agreement with him For a politician like Vladimir Putin, the desire for contact, the willingness to negotiate, the attempts to find a compromise, and discussions about the need to end the war are undoubtedly signs of weakness and insecurity. And so, the level of escalation and aggressive actions from the Kremlin will only increase in the coming months. And as we can see, it's certainly not just when it comes to Ukraine. Vladimir Putin will look for the most painful points that are important to the new American president and his administration, and will strike at those points to make the weakness of the new US administration obvious to the rest of the world. And he, Putin, looked like the absolute master of the situation. One can only wonder how Donald Trump plans to respond to such a challenge. And if the new American president has the levers of influence that can make the Russian president back down, if not in the Russian-Ukrainian war, then at least in relations with countries like Iran and North Korea. After all, this is already about direct American interests. Even the possibility of involving American troops in a military conflict, if, for example, such a conflict occurs on the Korean peninsula. There is a clear impression that Kim Jong-un is preparing for war, and not just a war with South Korea, but for a confrontation with American military forces. And this, by the way, is also a direct consequence of Donald Trump's attempts to negotiate with the North Korean dictator during his first presidency. That's when Kim Jong-un fancied himself a dictator, capable of challenging the United States. And here we go, Donald Trump is back in the White House, and for Kim Jong-un, just like for Vladimir Putin, the emergence of Donald Trump is a sign of weakness, not strength, as supporters of the new American president are currently claiming, and on which he, of course, is counting. Putin, Kim Jong-un, and Ayatollah Khamenei can certainly make mistakes. Donald Trump can respond much more decisively than dictators might think. His responses could lead to a conflict of unprecedented scale. Although Trump himself hopes to avoid such a conflict and seems to fear a third world war, his responses could lead to a conflict of unprecedented scale. Although Trump himself hopes to avoid such a conflict and seems to fear a third world war, but it is precisely this fear that will allow dictators to act more harshly, more treacherously, and more bloodthirstily. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel, subscribe to it, follow me on my social media, on Patreon, buy me a coffee, Donatella, which helps develop all the resources, and use the sponsor feature. What's going on? The YouTube itself.